Good afternoon, everyone. It's time for Fast Facts and Features with me, the brand ambassador, Jeanette Martin for Ethical Flooring. And I'm joined again by Kevin because we're into a big topic this month that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Because the more that you understand the evolution of how hardwood floors have come to be known to be installed, the more you will understand how maybe you want to renovate and take some out or put some more back in, or change it up. So Kevin, are you ready?
I am. I must say, Jeanette, I'm not the kind of guy to notice such things, but your hair looks really nice today.
Oh, thank you. I decided to, mix it up a bit, got a little bit curly, It's winter time, hair can be down. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's pretty hard.
I don't have any experience with that, so
I've got lots to spare. So the next time we're at Night Shift Street Ministries together, I'll give you some of my hair, okay?
You make me a wig, we can make it look
not a problem.
long blonde dreads.
Perfect. I'm in. Okay. So let's not get people dreading on how they learn about hardwood floors. Nice segue, eh? Nice segue. So before we get into, thank you so much. Before we came on, you've got a little bit of show and tell for us. Can you talk about the history of hardwood flooring being installed? Because 100 years ago, 50 years ago, there was no glue. So what is the history of how hardwood floors have be known to be installed using the nail down method?
Yeah, I guess my knowledge doesn't, we do run into heritage homes at times where you have these these old growth fir floors, which are really cool. Again, that was a whole different animal because it wasn't just the visible flooring. It was also the subflooring all in one. So these huge long fir planks, and they would go over the joists or go over shiplap, and as things progress. But kind of bringing up into the semi-modern era in the Vancouver area, we run into a lot of top nail hardwood floors.
I love top nail floors.
You're a North fan, so these are usually 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. They're very thin, so they don't have a tongue and groove system. And as the name implies, they were nailed down from the top in a nice linear row. And, obviously very time consuming. From what I understand, eventually they made ride-on machines that would do it, and they would nail it as you were hitting it, riding on the machine. But a whole different way of installing wood. Obviously, you would see the nails. That's part of it. Eventually those would pop up, or they would become more visible over time as the filler kind of wore away. And the worst thing about them, I guess, was that they all creak, right? They all make quite a bit of noise because those nails, if they were tight in 1960, are not tight anymore. So the biggest thing we run into is if we come into a home and they want a modern floor and they have this top nail floor, and then a lot of people are, well, can't you just go over top of it? Well, the answer, back in the day when things were not done quite so professionally, maybe you try and screw it as much as you could and install it. But at these days, the best point is really just to remove it, get down to the joists, if possible, build it back up with plywood, and then either nail down, staple down, or glue down your new hardwood floor. So,
and just to pause you there for a second, I know with removing it, it's not just being removed and trashed. I do know that as project managers, there are people out there that are looking for that wood salvaged, either to, got to fix a closet or something like that, or to manufactured in such being thin, and you're able to be able to reuse it. So when people say we remove these floors and it just kind of ends up in the landfill, very rarely. I remember when I was a project manager, that type of hardwood floor top nail was ever kind of thrown out.
Yeah, you could go onto Facebook Marketplace or something similar, I'm sure, and get rid of it quite quickly, right? So kind of the next evolution of that was the tongue and groove system, which essentially hid the nails, right? So now we've moved to a blind nailing. We're nailing through a tongue, and then the groove of the adjoining board, it kind of encapsulates it and hides it. And now we're into modern 3/4 inch thick tongue and groove type flooring, and this is installed, with a nail system, and it's still very much the same today, even all of these years later. Not so much in Vancouver, but in Eastern Canada and Eastern US and Central US, they still do a lot of 3/4 inch solid nail down floors. That's kind of their bread and butter, where in Vancouver, it's the complete opposite, right? We're almost exclusively engineered wood floor, and more often than not, at least with us, we're gluing it down. So, but nail down floors they're still done out there, just not so commonly by us.
So what type? Okay, so if I've got a nail down floor now, and I know when I was, again, as a project manager, hardwood flooring manufacturers were coming out with, your standard nail down floor was that 2 1/4 inch, 1 to 7 foot long lengths. And then they kind of creeped up to 3 1/4 inch. Then they creeped up to 4 1/4 inch, still solid. And I have seen hardwood floors out there that are solid at like 5 and 6 and 7 inch. Now, what's your thoughts about nailing down? Because traditionally I was allowed to nail down a solid floor. What's your words of wisdom for a wider, still solid, not engineered floor, solid floor in the installation method?
Yeah, the general rule of thumb is that you don't really want to go wider than 4 1/4 inches with a solid wood floor.
Okay.
And that's not very wide in contemporary standards. So that's why it's pretty much eliminated most of it in the Vancouver market. But if you were to do a 4 1/4 or even a 5 inch wide solid, long ago we started implementing a nail and glue method. So sometimes it's called glue assist. Essentially, when you're getting a solid wood product and it's getting on the wider end of the scale, these nail patterns only 4 1/4 inches or 5 inches apart isn't necessarily enough to support the floor fully as it moves throughout the seasons, from the winter heating months to the summer cooling months. So the industry started introducing adhesive in addition to nailing, and so that's coming out of a caulking gun, and you're basically doing an S pattern onto the subfloor, putting the wood into it, and now you're nailing the row. So it's kind of a hybrid, and it works really well. Obviously, you can't do that on concrete because you can't nail into concrete. So most new homes are concrete subfloors with radiant heat systems. So that's another reason why nailing has become less popular.
So show us what a nail looks like when it comes to hardwood flooring. What does
this is called a cleat.
Okay, perfect.
Do you see it? This is called a cleat nail. So it has a serrated edge or along both sides, which obviously that is intended to grip very well into the subfloor, but it also has a smooth portion at the top, which allows, actually perhaps counterintuitively, allows the wood to actually move a little bit around that smooth portion. And that's to allow for some normal seasonal expansion and contraction with changes in humidity, right? So how that is installed is with a nailer. This is a common example what it looks like. You load the, I'm going backwards here. Load the cleat nails in there. It's a pneumatic nailer, so you hit the one end of it. It's hooked up to an air compressor, and basically it'll blow the cleat into the floor. And again, it worked, and that was done for many years. But it worked with the narrower planks, where you can imagine if you have a narrow floor, your nail lines or your rows of nails are quite close together, maybe only 2 1/4 inches apart, right? As the industry demanded wider boards, that nail pattern became wider and wider, and now you had basically the middle of the wood unsupported. And I think most people would agree it just isn't sufficient. And like I said, 10 plus years ago, we started introducing glue assist to it. And in the early years, we used construction adhesive, which was what the installers recommended. In time, I realized that was wrong. But there really wasn't anything else out there. But now there's dedicated hardwood floor adhesives that are to be used with this nail and glue system, and they're very elastomeric. And what that means is that they allow the natural expansion and contraction of the wood to occur Again, it's all, we think about that we're solidly putting something down to the subfloor, and we are, but we also want to build in some movement allowance because it is still a living, breathing product, and it's going to change depending on the humidity and temperature. So that was where construction adhesives weren't the right product because they dried so rigid. They didn't really allow for that natural expansion.
It almost had double creaking, creaking sometimes on the nail, the wood moving on the nail, and then not the right glue, that crunchy sound. And just for the layman's out there, as we wrap this up, unless you have, okay, does the cleat go in the tongue?
I have one more picture to show.
Oh, okay. What's that?
It's a staple, and it's a giant staple. It's not what you'd use in your stapler for paper, but effectively is doing the same thing, and it's just as popular now actually for installing wood floors as the cleat nail is. So some people will argue one has an advantage over the other, but effectively at the end of the day they're doing the same thing. So those are the two primary ways. You're going to cleat nail, you're going to staple, or you're going to staple. You may add a glue assist to that as well, which is highly recommended. And then kind of the last layer of that is the full spread glue down, which I know we'll talk about in the future.
Absolutely. So just for the layman out there, as always, I wrap this up, am I using the cleat or the nail on the tongue side or on the groove side?
Yeah, you're nailing it through the tongue. So I don't have a piece of 3/4 or even any hardwood floor here, but you basically push the tongue, or sorry, the groove up against the previously installed row of tongues, keeping some pressure on that, and then now you're nailing that tongue, basically putting it into place. Oops. Sorry.
Oh, and that somebody wants you for an install. So you know what, Kevin? That's a great time for us to, because go ahead.
Yeah, so you're nailing through the tongue, and then you're basically building off of that row across the entire installation space.
Fantastic. So let's carry on our conversation next week as we move into I'm going to say the chemical makeup of glues, how it's evolved over the years. And then, get your geek on. I know you're going to be geeking out big time, Kevin, because I know from the time where I was, on the tools working with the guys, the adhesives, the acoustical, it has changed so much to meet the environments of the various parts, even the country it's very different as well. So get ready, go do your geeking out, and we will see you back here next Wednesday at 2 p.m. for another edition of Facts, and Features. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jeanette. Bye-bye.